now fighting even harder to communicate in this Tower of Babel agency.
Yes, that worries me too. Mental health is the field that I know best, and the Department of Mental Health in Connecticut is a real national leader.
Right.
When the federal government rolls out a new program, we're usually one of the first half dozen states to get it. We write good proposals, but we write those proposals because we understand what we're trying to do.
Right.
It's a recovery-oriented system. We have a pretty good partnership with families and clients or consumers. We have integrated mental health care and addiction services. Not to say we've done it perfectly, but we're moving in a recovery-oriented interdisciplinary direction. Not every state agency has done that, and not every state agency has the same respect from its patrons or funders in Washington or in foundations.
Right.
And I worry that we would lose that advantage and that reputation and that the real substance of that quality if we were merged into some lowest common denominator sort of department. Not only that, each department already has its hands full with its own clients. Budgets have been cut, not just the sort of the stereotypical whipping boy of the state employees, but the nonprofit grants accounts too. I don't really care who provides the services as long as they're good services,
right.
and the focus should be on client outcomes. But everybody's hurting these days, and they've all got their hands full. And to give them another task, another big task of another client base of these other four agencies that they'd suddenly have to work out procedures with, would just be a tremendous distraction from the work that they should be doing for clients.
It's hard enough to kind of give a illustration. It's hard enough to put food on the table for your family, which would be maybe the small nonprofit. And then you're asked to put food on a buffet for your region, which we see, especially with the homeless issues. We've had kind of a back and forth cooperative effort between regions and cities and towns. But then you're now saying, okay, now we just are going to have this big festival where you're going to put, we're all going to put the food in and hope that it works and feed the thousands with whatever shows up at the table and divide it equally and make sure that all your different families are well fed. And there's no guarantee that they're going to be fed.
It's like putting it all in a blender and you wind up with mush. That's a good way to put it. Another analogy would be athletes. Some people like football and some people like baseball, and some people can do both, but not without a lot of practice. And that's really the problem here. You can't assume that.
And when you say football, are you talking about football or are you talking about soccer?
Soccer, yeah.
Because we're speaking different languages.
That's very good.
Right.
So on the one hand, you'll be punishing agencies that have made real progress. On the second hand, this is going to be a real octopus here. On the second hand, you're giving people an extra job of learning 4 other languages. On a third hand, you'll be asking people to learn not just languages but whole cultures. You'll be giving an advantage to the people whose main language is bureaucracy. Because that's the one thing they'll all have in common.
Right.
They'll all have to learn, they'll all have to the communication will become more primitive. If you're speaking to somebody who speaks Russian or French or something else, you can point and you can grunt and you can learn a few words in common, but you'll lose a lot of the nuance. In the same way, these procedures will, because some people won't understand them, the distinctive parts, because some things might even be wrong in one context,
Right.
but work in another. You'll
Right.
have to give them up because the people in charge won't accept it.
Right. I know with mental health, and we had talked earlier before the show about our interest in this show on prison communities and people with a criminal background and their reentry into society. And one of the things that I noticed when I worked at Reliance House is even if you're in this one sector that you provide for, you're always reaching out and touching other sectors. We worked with the criminal justice system. We worked with physicians. We worked with education systems, and it all worked well because the focus was always centered in what we were doing.
Exactly.
We could always identify the purpose. And my concern is if everything's combined, not so much from the ground up. I think that from the ground up, people are still going to know their focus, but from the tip of the pyramid looking down, the people determining funding and
Exactly it.
administration, they only see the little ants on the sidewalk, and they don't realize, what they need and what's going on with them.
Yes, I think that's right. I don't get me wrong. It's not that I think that people should never talk to each other or that they should stay in their own silo and not worry about something that's not their specific problem. Not at all. Just the opposite. I think we need to talk to each other. We need to be a Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services and Education and Reentry. We need to be a Department of Developmental Services integrated into the community. We need to worry about medical needs because people with mental illness die 25 years earlier than everyone else on the average. And I'm not saying that we do everything right and they do everything wrong. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that the way to cooperate is to meet at the point of tangency, with each contributing its expertise to the solution of the client's problem. And that way you can leave the parochial parts aside. You can leave those at home.
Right.
And corrections is a good example. People in community mental health are much more open and accepting of the people they work with. People in corrections are dealing with known criminals. They need to have a different attitude.
Right, and it's very much a controlling relationship.
But there's still a point where the two come together.
Right.
Where the whole point of corrections in the literal sense is supposed to be making it less likely that people will go back to prison.
Correct.
And to do that, you need the help of people in the community.
Correct.
And we've done a good job in recent years, at least a better job, of helping people with that transition. It used to be, you served your sentence, they'd clank the door behind you the day it was over.
Right.
And
here's your shoes.
Right.
and your shoelaces. Goodbye.
Right. Well, we don't do that anymore.
Right.
And so, 6 months ahead of time, they might contact with the community mental health if you have a mental illness, with the community mental health program, and they'll start to get benefits in place and housing and so forth. And so the transition is easier because both sides recognize that it's important that they're dealing with the same person. And they have to help that person change from one environment to the other.
It's kind of hard to see
but they stay in their own. Yes, they stay in their own environment.
Yeah, and it's hard to see the person if you're looking at them from a fiscal perspective, from the top down. Especially in a state where in the last 20 years the spending has tripled. We have a call.
All right.
Good evening, you're on Street Talk.
Good evening, Tambria. Thank you. Things are looking good, and Bob, it's great to see you on the show.
That's Father Russ.
Hi, Russ.
It's been a while since I've been seeing you, Bob. But my interest, obviously, is really, you're talking about the prison stuff, and I wish I could be across the table from you to ask the question. As my concern